This rapid revision exam skills video, looking at the Pearson Edexcel Paper 1. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the medicine through time topic, and this is question 4, the explain question, worth 12 marks. Firstly, a little bit more detail about the Pearson Edexcel Paper 1. It has two main components. One of these is the historic environment or source inquiry question, for which a sources booklet is enclosed. For example, the British sector of the Western Front, 1914 to 1918, injuries, treatment and the trenches. The other bit is the thematic study. In this case, medicine in Britain, circa 1250 to the present. However, if you're studying one of the different topics, that's absolutely fine. The different skills that I'm going to demonstrate in this video will be equally relevant. It'll just be the examples that are different. So this video could still well be useful to you. The total time for this exam is 1 hour and 15 minutes, so make sure that you manage your time carefully, and remember that's for both sections. So let's get into it and have a look at this style of question. Let's take some time breaking down the question. Question 4. Explain why there were improvements in medical knowledge in the years circa 1500 to circa 1700. This is worth 12 marks, so let's see what you'll actually have to do to get those 12 marks. Firstly, you're going to have to explain why. In this case, explaining why there were improvements. So it's looking at causation. Don't just write down everything that you know about Renaissance medicine. Explain why there were improvements. What led to those advances? Also, you should bear in mind that this is the focus of the question. Improvements in medical knowledge in the years circa 1500 to circa 1700. So hopefully, if you've done your revision, your mind's already firing off lots of examples of how medical knowledge did improve in the Renaissance period. But just to give you a little bit of help, there are some stimulus points too. You may use the following in your answer. That means you don't have to, but it's probably a good idea to, because at least you know that these points are going to be relevant. Obviously, if you don't know something about them, then just write about things that you do know, because you must also use information of your own to get the full marks. So if you don't take your knowledge anywhere beyond Thomas Sydenham and the printing press, you're going to really limit yourself in the number of marks that you get. So let's see what else is expected of you with this style of question. For this question, you will need to explain how examples you know led to improvements in medical knowledge between the specified dates, in this case 1500 and 1700, which correspond to the Renaissance period. This is a section from the examiner's mark scheme. The target here is the analysis of second order concepts, in this case causation and change. Also, you'll get marks for your knowledge and understanding of features and characteristics. And notice that the marks are equally split between the explanation and analysis side of things and your knowledge, 6 marks for each. You should include enough examples, 3 is probably sufficient, and include a brief conclusion explaining the most important reason and overall theme as to why there was progress. And do bear in mind that when I say 3 is probably sufficient, I'm talking about the big themes that you're going to be writing about here. So I could always note down as part of my plan the third example I'm going to go with. So I've got Thomas Sydenham, I've got the printing press, let's throw in Andreas Vesalius, who I think will go with those other two really well. You should aim to spend about 18 minutes on this question. It is worth 12 marks, and that's a fair whack of what you're going to get in the exam. So do give this question the respect it deserves and make sure that you write enough. Let's have a look at an example answer and how you might approach it. Before we do though, it might be useful to just have a really quick look at the examiner's mark scheme. We're going to focus on levels 3 and 4 for this. There are levels 1 and 2 as well, but I'm not sure it's particularly helpful looking at the really low marks because we want to at least be aiming higher than that. So in level 3, you can see it says an explanation is given showing some analysis which is mainly directed at the conceptual focus of the question. Compare that to level 4. An analytical explanation is given which is directed consistently at the conceptual focus at the question. So you'll have to make sure that you're really focused on it to get level 4. It shows a line of reasoning that is generally sustained, although some passages may lack coherence and organisation for level 3. But if you're much more precise than that, you can expect to get level 4, showing a line of reasoning that is coherent, sustained and logically structured. Then we've got accurate and relevant information being included, showing good knowledge. Compare that to level 4. Accurate and relevant information is precisely selected to address the question directly, showing wide-ranging knowledge and understanding of the required features and characteristics of the period studied. So in other words, you've chosen really good examples to demonstrate what you're explaining rather than just whatever ones you can think of. Just a quick warning again about the own knowledge thing. maximum of 8 marks for level 3 answers that do not go beyond the aspects prompted in the stimulus points. What that means basically is if you don't use your own knowledge, if you just write about Thomas Sydenham and the printing press, you're going to be limiting yourself to 8 marks in total. So let's have a look at how we're going to go about this. The exam paper will look a little something like this. We've got the question there and we've got space to write our answer. I find a useful way of structuring your work so that you include the necessary levels of both knowledge and analysis is point, example, explain and link. You don't have to use this, but if you do struggle to structure your answer, it's a good way to go. One reason there were improvements in medical knowledge in the years 1500 to 1700 was the work of Andreas Vesalius. All right, so I'm starting with my own knowledge bit. That's absolutely fine. It just seems to make sense chronologically. Vesalius was able to dissect human bodies thanks to the support of a local magistrate in Padua who supplied the corpses of executed criminals. Vesalius believed in performing dissections himself rather than relying on Galen without question, as had been the case up to now. As a result, he was able to correct over 300 mistakes that Galen made, such as believing that the jawbone was in 2 parts when it was really 1 bone. He demonstrated that these mistakes were due to Galen dissecting animals. This led to improvements in medical understanding because Vesalius was able to demonstrate that Galen was not always correct. This meant other people would start questioning old ideas and seeking new ones. So where have I picked up the marks in this first section of my answer? Well, do bear in mind there's loads more I could write on Andreas Vesalius, and I am just trying to keep this on one screen without it going completely crazy in terms of font size. So if it does seem a little bit concise and brief, I think it would still get a really good mark, but bear in mind there is more you could add. But for the first part, I'm going to get some AO2 for that because I'm showing that this is an improvement in medical knowledge and I'm attributing it to Andreas Vesalius. I'm going to definitely get AO1 knowledge marks though for these different examples of how Vesalius improved medicine. I'll take it further with my explanations of the effects of this as well. There's going to be both AO1 and AO2 in that third part. And lastly, extra analysis in really linking it back to that question. This led to improvements in medical understanding. That is really linking it back to what has been asked in the question, and that's crucial. So that's my first paragraph done. Let's move on to my next one. What am I going to write about? Sydenham, the printing press? Let's see. Again, I'm going to use point, example, explain and link here. Another reason why there were improvements was the printing press. Vesalius did not just dissect bodies, he produced books such as Fabric of the Human Body, which used detailed notes and realistic illustrations to demonstrate improvements in the knowledge of human anatomy. Previous to the printing press, books have been handwritten. This made them rare and expensive, and they were typically produced by the church, who could then control the knowledge within them. The printing press offered a faster, cheaper, and more reliable way of mass producing books. This led to improvements because knowledge like that discovered by Vesalius could now be accurately shared in different languages without the church interfering with new ideas, part of a general trend of challenging the power of the church during the Reformation, leading to new ideas. So let's see where I've got the marks here. I got some AO2 in my point again because I'm relating the printing press to the improvements in medical knowledge, and then I'm including some relevant details related actually to my previous point about Vesalius, which is quite neat. Then my explanation also includes some extra knowledge, but relates it again to this idea of why that was an improvement. I'm going to really link it back to the question. Why is it that taking books out of the hands of the church led to medical improvements? And why did it lead to new ideas? So I imagine my next example is going to be about Thomas Sydenham. Let's have a look. Same structure again. A later example challenging old ideas was Thomas Sydenham in the 1600s. Sydenham was known as the English Hippocrates because he also used detailed observation and diagnosis. However, he took these ideas further by identifying that specific illnesses could be diagnosed, such as Sydenham's cholera, and then specific treatments recommended to treat it. This was different to how people approached treatment before, as Sydenham's methods taught to treat the underlying disease and not just the observable symptoms, even if he had little understanding of the actual cause of disease. This led to improvements as Sydenham also widely published his ideas in Observationes Medicae in 1676, which was a valuable book for physicians trying new methods of diagnosis and treatment. Well, apart from my terrible Latin pronunciation there, let's see how I got on. So I've related Thomas Sydenham to the idea of improvements, and I've added some detail as to what he did and what I know about him. I've explained, as well as adding more knowledge, of why this was useful, and then linked it back to the question and said why that was an improvement. So I'm just about done. I've shown so far lots of wide-ranging and hopefully precisely selected knowledge which is related to what we're meant to be looking at, improvements in medical knowledge. I've also explained it well, but have I done enough? Well, sometimes to get that really top mark in terms of the explanations, you need to show an extra layer of analysis. There's nothing in the mark scheme that demands a conclusion, but I do often find that it's a useful way of demonstrating that extra layer of analysis to the examiner so they're in absolutely no doubt that you are a level 4 pupil and not a level 3 one. So let's have a look. We don't need to do anything particularly radical with the conclusion, so let's have a look at it now. Overall, the most important reason there were improvements in medical knowledge was the printing press. All the major medical individuals of the Renaissance period, including Vesalius, Sydenham and Harvey, were able to widely share their new thinking without the interference of the church. This allowed them to be inspired by the ideas of those that came before them, like Vesalius, while encouraging others to investigate their own theories and question old ones like Galen, which the church had previously discouraged people from questioning. This improved medical understanding by contributing accurately to sharing the body of medical knowledge in Europe, as encouraged by the Royal Society. So I've added some extra explanation, in this case looking at what the most important reason was. I'm going to have a look thematically as well, so maybe the theme could have been the challenging of the church. I've added extra detail, and some more again, and finally I've even added some extra detail into this one, but linked it back to this idea of improvements. So although I've not added a great deal that's extra, I've just taken that extra layer of analysis by saying that I recognise that actually there is a most important reason why there are improvements in medical knowledge in this time. So that should have got me all the marks. Let's hope so. So we're going to use broadly the same structure here, even though this is an example of what not to do when you're answering this question. Let's see if you can spot where I've made some mistakes. One improvement to knowledge was William Harvey proving that blood circulated in the body. Harvey was a doctor who was the physician of James I and Charles I, and he experimented on live frogs to show how the blood circulated. Seems accurate so far, so where am I going wrong? This made William Harvey a very skilled physician because he used frogs to demonstrate his idea about the circulation of the blood. This made Harvey important because he was correct about the circulation of the blood and proved it. So am I going to get any marks for this bit? Well, in truth, yeah, I will. For example, this is a relevant piece of knowledge. William Harvey was from the correct period, and that is something that was an improvement in knowledge. I'll get some credit for AO1 here as well, but I'm really falling down on AO2. My supporting explanation is pretty much just a repetition of what I put before, so try not to repeat yourself, you're not adding anything new. And what about my link back to the question? Well, that's a mistake as well, because let's face it, it doesn't link back to the question. I'm meant to be explaining why there were improvements in medical knowledge, and instead I've explained here why Harvey might be considered important. So I've got the focus wrong here. I'll get a few marks for AO1, but I won't pick up any AO2 marks for this at all. So the knowledge, well, it's reasonable, but the explanation's pretty rubbish. Don't make this mistake. If you're not studying the medicine topic, you could always try some of these for your own. For example, warfare through time. Explain why the impact on war on civilians changed in the period circa 1900 to present. You may use the following in your answer: conscription and evacuation. You must also use information of your own. Perhaps, for example, you'll give examples of battles or wars that affected civilian populations particularly badly, like the Second World War, or maybe air attack in the 20th century. And then we've got another question here. Explain why the role of the mounted knight changed in the period 1250 to circa 1500. You may use the following in your answer: the longbow and the feudal army. You must also use information of your own. So perhaps you'll mention the Battle of Agincourt with the longbow. Or perhaps, as the question goes up to 1500, you'll start writing about the introduction of firearms and how that made armour obsolete. Or perhaps you're looking at crime and punishment through time. Explain why there have been changes in the work of the police in the period from 1900 to the present day. You may use the following in your answer: forensic science and cars. You must also use information of your own. So I suppose it's mostly gone, the idea of the Bobby on the beat, isn't it? But cars allow police to not only police traffic, but actually be more mobile and cover a wider area. What about this one? Explain why there were new definitions of crimes against authority in the years circa 1000 to 1700. That's a lot of things to cover there, so it's going right from the sort of early medieval period through to the end of the Renaissance. You may use the following in your answer: poaching and heresy. So for example, with poaching, think about the forest laws during the time of William the Conqueror. And in terms of heresy, you might look at Lollardy or one of the other ways in which heretics were accused and punished, maybe even Bloody Mary in the Tudor period. Again, this is a really broad question, this, with a very wide date range. Some final points then. 12-mark explain questions require detailed knowledge and precise explanation. You should spend about 18 minutes on these questions, and a very brief plan can be time well spent. You'll be provided with 2 stimulus points, which you may use, but you will need to use examples from your own knowledge too. You'll need to explain your answer in relation to the issue raised by the question, so keep this in mind. And if you do struggle to structure your writing, remember, make your point. Give an example that's relevant to the topic, explain the effects or the importance of this, and then link it back to what you've been asked to write about in the question. And if you do that, you'll get your AO1 marks for your knowledge and your AO2 marks for analysis. I hope that's been helpful, and if it has, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more, and there'll be more, often shorter, rapid revision videos coming up on a variety of topics soon. So stay tuned. Thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.